Welcome into 76ers Now. I am Jake Chipper, and on today's show, the Sixers getting some great news on a potential trade target in Herb Jones. Going to dive into why a trade for Herb Jones might be more likely now than ever before. Before we get into it, though, I want to gauge the audience right now. As it stands right now, how would you grade the 76ers roster as we enter the NBA offseason on a scale of 1 through 10? 1 being it's awful, it is the worst roster in the entire league. 10 being it's the best roster in the NBA and they're guaranteed to win the championship. Go scale it for me down in the comments section. So Kevin O'Connor of Yahoo Sports, where they report here today that there are no untouchables. That's a direct quote in New Orleans. So really anybody could potentially be had in a trade. Here is the full quote from Kevin O'Connor. There are no untouchables in New Orleans. League sources say the Pelicans are gauging the market for everyone on their roster. They very well could end up keeping their core pieces, namely Zion Williamson, but it appears the Pelicans are looking into taking different paths this summer, depending on what opportunities become available. This is pretty significant and a pretty big change from what we've heard regarding some of their role players in the past, specifically Herb Jones, who there's been reports over really the previous year and some change that New Orleans would have zero interest in trading Herb Jones, that they see him as a key piece of their roster, and it would take a mountainous offer to lure him away from New Orleans. But now it's sounding like maybe it is possible to go in there and get a deal done. And if it is possible, I think the Sixers should absolutely be interested. This is a player in Herb Jones who, prior to the season, where played just 20 games, dealt with injuries, and wasn't as efficient, he had been one of the best defenders in the entire league with a growing offensive game in the mold of a 3-and-D ultra role player that all these championship contending type teams covet on their rosters, and the Sixers really don't have a player at that caliber with those skill sets right now. And he's on a super affordable contract both this year and next year, or I should say this upcoming season and the following season in 2026-2027. Herb Jones is under contract for just $14 and about $15 million. If you're getting a player with his potential skill set, his growing offensive game, and his dominant defense at that price, it's really hard to beat that in terms of value on contracts in today's NBA, especially given where the CBA and all the cap rules are at right now. Now, where Herb Jones really makes his money, and the reason I would love him, and I'm sure all 30 NBA teams would love him on their roster, is on the defensive side of the ball. Just last year, 2023-2024, he was an all-defensive first-team player, meaning voters saw him as a top 5 defender in the entire league. That's really saying something right there for a 6'7", 6'8" wing. And during that tremendous defensive year for New Orleans, he was one of 7 players to average 1.4 steals and 0.8 blocks per game, one of 9 players who had at least 3 games of at least 5 steals. He was 3rd in the entire NBA in contested three-point shots a game at 3.4, and he was 11th in isolation points per possession allowed at 0.73. So you can kind of see all these different defensive numbers and defensive metrics. He was just getting it done all over the floor for New Orleans, and he can truly guard anywhere from 1 to 4, and I'd argue even some lighter 5s he could match up against and do a pretty decent job. And I found these metrics as well on the Pelicans website, actually, when they were campaigning for Herb Jones to be an all defensive first team player last year. They showed what some of the players' numbers were when Herb Jones was guarding key opposing players, what those players shot from the field. And funny enough, it does start with Paul George, but I mean, you see some of the top offensive players in our game here. Paul George shot 33% on 21 attempts against Herb Jones last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the MVP of our league now, shot just 35% against Herb Jones last season. You see DeJounte Murray at 20%. Lauri Markkanen, someone we talked about a lot on the show, just 16%. Tyrese Halliburton, 33%. James Harden, although on only 2 attempts, didn't make either of those. So you can kind of see he's locking up some of these best players, and it's a wide variety of players too. It's some wings, it's some guards, even a couple bigs on the list as you keep going down. This is just the top 10 guys in terms of minutes played against him. You also see the turnovers and blocks forced. He is just a menace defensively. Now, the big question with Herb Jones and where his value can really change and his upside can really go through the roof is with his offense. Can that offense be consistent? And can he continue to grow? And can he show more signs of what he showed in 2023, 2024, which was probably his best defensive season, but also probably his best offensive season? You take a look at his catch and shoot three-point percentages in his career over the last 4 seasons. And, first 2 years coming into the league, it was obviously an area of growth that he needed to show and wasn't very great from behind the arc those first couple of seasons. But then in 2023, 2024, he shot 40% from three as a whole, and on catch and shoot threes, which is where he's mostly going to operate on that perimeter. He's not really someone you're going to give the ball to and ask to go take a pull-up three or pull-up in transition, anything like that. He shot 42.5% nearly from catch and shoot threes on 3.5 attempts a game. Pretty decent volume and obviously knocking them down at a high rate. But then this past season, he was injured, played just 20 games, but the numbers were not good once again. So which Herb Jones are you getting? Are you getting the one who shot these low 30 percentages in 3 out of his 4 seasons? Or can you unlock this Herb Jones that was an elite 3-and-D player in the best season of his career? That's really going to determine and dictate what kind of player you're getting and how his career is going to go. Because if that offense comes along, man, watch out. He goes from still being one of the best defenders in the NBA, but someone you're worried about on offense, to all of a sudden being this dynamic two-way wing. Someone in the mold of someone like a Mikal Bridges almost, or an OG Anunoby. Not quite the offensive creation of someone like a Mikal Bridges, but, in that mold of that two-way wing who can really get it done on both ends of the floor. It's really a difference between being someone like a Chris Dunn, for example, of the Los Angeles Clippers, who an amazing defender. And a little bit different because Herb Jones is taller and provides a little more versatility defensively to guard more players. But in the playoffs for the Clippers, Chris Dunn really got played off the floor a lot because he would just get left wide open offensively and couldn't do anything about it. So you can't utilize his defense when it matters most in the playoffs. If Herb Jones is that much of a liability on offense, then how much do you want to leave him out there in a crucial playoff setting? If the offense comes along, though, you're talking about a really dynamic player. Now, the asking price is going to be high. We've talked about Herb Jones a few times on the show, and I've shown some different trade scenarios, and people seem to think that giving up a first or a first and some change is too much for Herb Jones. I'm telling you right now, it's not. And New Orleans is probably going to be asking for multiple first-round picks in addition to some players as well. It's just what the value is for one of the better defenders in the entire NBA. Again, a guy who was voted as a top 5 defender in the entire league just a season ago. So I got a couple different trade ideas. This first one involves trading down in the draft. If the Sixers are interested in moving down a little bit, I have Herb Jones, and number 7 is what the Pelicans send to the Sixers. In exchange, Philadelphia sends New Orleans Kelly Oubre Jr., Andre Drummond, number 3, and then a 2030 first-round pick as well. It's an interesting scenario because, you trade back a little bit if you're Philadelphia, so you're able to still keep a top 10 pick in this draft. And for New Orleans, you're giving up Herb Jones, and you're getting, some players like Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond who, let's just be honest, they don't have much value around the association. I think Kelly Oubre has a little bit. He's still a good player, but I'm not sure he's a starting player on a contending team. Drummond at this point, obviously near the back end of his career, but if you're New Orleans, you move it up to number 3, you get a shot at a high ceiling prospect that you might not get at number 7, and then of course you get that future first. Now there's another scenario where the Sixers maybe do not want to trade out of number 3. They want to keep that pick, which is what I would do as well. So in this scenario, give up Oubre, Drummond again, give up your second round pick this year, which is at number 35. That's pretty close to a first round pick, and I think in a draft like this, that could be a pretty valuable pick for a team like New Orleans, who only currently has pick number 7 this year. They do not have a second round pick. So you can entice them a little bit by giving them another shot, another dart to throw in this year's draft. And it's not like a late second. Again, it's very close to being a top 30 first round pick. And then in this case, since they don't have the aspect of trading up for a top 3 pick, I think you'd have to give up that 2028 Clippers first, which I think is a very valuable asset. Obviously, the Clippers, you're in LA. They're probably always going to find a way to be relevant, but also with the way their team is constructed right now with Kawhi and James Harden, an older roster, What are they going to look like in 2028? That could be a very good pick, but I'd be willing to part ways if I'm getting Herb Jones in this deal. At the end of the day, you got to give something good to get good players. You can't just trade junk and expect to get guys who are some of the best players in the league, and in this case, some of the best players on one side of the ball in the league. I know a lot of people are still going to be upset in the comments about having to trade away possibly multiple first-round picks for a player like Herb Jones. You'd rather save it for a big-name trade, and I can understand that. But if you're healthy, if this team is healthy going into next year, and you either keep 3 or trade down to 7 and add Herb Jones to this roster, and he's able to give you that, at least that defensive production that you know he's going to be able to, and then a little bit more on offense, it's a very, very dangerous starting 5 this Sixers team can have if they can hold on to people like Quentin Grimes, Gershon Yabusele. He would be the perfect fit around all these other offensive-oriented players because the Sixers don't really have a true shutdown guy that can go out and guard the opposing team's number 1 player in the playoffs. What say you? Should the Sixers trade for Herb Jones? Let me know down in the comments section. Give me a T for trade or a P for pass. Let your voices be heard. Love to get you guys involved here on the show. All right, that'll do it for today's 76ers Now. Of course, we talk trade rumors, other free agency, draft rumors, all throughout the offseason and all throughout the season as well. So looking for a place to get your Sixers news all year long, do it right here at 76ers Now. Be sure, hit that sub button and turn on those notifications, and we'll see you next time here on the show.